Hello, and welcome to e-sgol's revision sessions. This is session 3 out of 4. I'm Karen Thomas, and I've been teaching for 24 years, various roles in my teaching career. I'm currently working for e-sgol and the WJC, but I'm also a history teacher, and I'm doing that at the moment, and I have done that for 24 years. And lots of pupils will ask at this time of year, how do you revise? So we've been looking at different revision techniques. So what I'm doing this session is recap on what we did in our last session, which was the importance of spacing out and interleaving revision. We also looked at sticky ideas, the Pomodoro technique, and organisation, and how a weekly revision timetable can really help you. So we'll recap on those, and then in today's session, I will also look at additional revision techniques, which are things like dual coding, concrete examples, elaboration, command words, map it out, brain dumps, importance of past papers, self-quizzing, and mnemonics. So, retrieval. This is what we've been concentrating on each one of our previous sessions. So, retrieval practice is learning a strategy where we focus on getting information out of our brains. And through the act of retrieval, or calling information to mind, our memory becomes strengthened and forgetting is less likely to occur. So, retrieval practice is a powerful tool for improving learning. So what you can do is use your class notes and textbooks and make a list of the most important information and content that you need to know across different subjects, and then close your books and test yourself. And obviously you can create different things like quizzes and flashcards, each of those we've looked at, or complete past papers, and do that without using your notes to begin with. And that means you're retrieving as much information as you can, and then when you check your answers, it's important then that you can see what you've missed out or what you found difficult and what you don't know yet. And obviously then you can add to your answers, and you know what stage to take your revision onto, because you need to focus on the areas that you are struggling to recall from memory. So we know all of this. We know how important retrieval practice is. So in the last session, we spoke about spacing things out. So spaced practices is to start planning early for exams and to set aside a little bit of time every single day. So 5 hours spread over 2 weeks is better than 5 hours all in one day. So this is called spaced practice, and it's regarded as one of the most effective revision strategies. So it's really important that you divide your revision into short, manageable chunks of time. So we're aiming for about between 20 to 30 minutes per session, ideally 25. Now, mass practice or cramming is not effective and can be very stressful. So this is when you study for an intense period of time just before the exam. But it is better for you to start learning and revising months before your exam. So from this point on, really. And you need to plan your time carefully to ensure that all your subjects and all the topics that you need to learn are covered, and that they're covered in these short chunks over a longer period of time. So dividing your revision into smaller, manageable sections will benefit you in the long term. The revision you do now for mocks or for practice exam questions that you might be doing in class, that will stick for the final exam. So we looked at this as an example in our last session, where the learner here is cramming everything in on that Sunday before the test on the Monday. But a better way of doing revision is spacing it out so that every single day there's a little bit of revision being done for that test. There's even a day built in to relax, and then the Sunday, the day before the test, there's that little bit of revision just to recap. So breaking your revision into these smaller chunks and spacing them out is much more effective. We also looked last session at interleaving. So interleaving is a process where your students mix and combine multiple subjects and topics when they study in order to improve their learning. So the other way of doing this is blocked practice, but that involves studying the same topic again and again in your different sections of revision. Interleaving has been shown and proven to be much more effective than blocked practice and leading to better long-term retention. So by mixing it up like the plan here, it is much better for you. We actually looked at this as an example last session, where the student here has been looking at English and they decided to do all Macbeth on a Monday, all Inspector Calls on a Tuesday, and so on across the week. But it is much better to interleave and organise your revision in this way, where there's a little bit of each piece of revision every single night. And that is a much more effective strategy to connect information in your brain and to make sure that you're revising and your brain active while you're doing the different sections of revision every night. So this was another thing that we looked at last session, and that was sticky ideas. So being able to use flashcards and revision cards and question and answer cards, looking at questions that contain keywords, maybe making your own revision podcast, completing exam questions, using a mark scheme to mark your work then as well, maybe working with a revision buddy or a small revision group if that helps you to revise, and creating mind maps, each one more detailed than the previous. And also the how useful post-it notes are, having them all around the house to help you with your revision. And we looked at these two examples where you could put post-it notes anywhere around the house just to keep the information short, sharp, and things that you could look at and remember in short chunks of information. We also looked at the Pomodoro technique, and this is when you keep your revision to 25 to 30 minutes max, and you work on a task up until that time is up, and then you take your 5-minute break. And then you go back to your revision for another 25 minutes, take another 5-minute break. And every time you do this, when you've done 4 sessions like this, you take a longer break because you will need it to have that little section of relaxation and forget about what you've been studying, ready for your brain to take on the next session of revision that you're doing. So this is a very good proven technique that works as well. Now, we looked at weekly revision timetables in the last session, and I showed you this particular one. Obviously, with you still being in school, a lot of the daytime slots will be taken up still with lessons, but after school is really important as well. Now, this one is actually an hour slot, and we've been talking about 25 minutes to 30 minutes. So this particular timetable that I've got here is probably better for you to use because, as you can see, it's divided into 2 sections for each hour. So that would equate to 2 different sessions then for the hours that you've got. Now, all of these resources have been put into a little pack, and if you want to download them separately, you may, and I put this one as I think is a really good timetable that can be used from now on in really to your exams. You can use it during the school time, obviously block in some revision that you might do in free lessons in school, and then obviously you've got the time after school and perhaps a little bit before where you can plan some revision. So for today's session, we're going to look at some more revision ideas. So the first one we're going to look at for today's session is dual coding. Now, dual coding is the process of combining verbal materials with visual materials. There are many ways to visually represent materials. So you could have infographics, timelines, cartoons or comic strips, diagrams, graphic organizers. It basically means you are going to draw an image to represent the information that you've learned or to back up the information that you've learned. Now, when you're revising using class materials, try and think of ways that you can visualize the information, okay? And don't worry if you think to yourself, I'm not an artist, because it's not about the quality of your illustrations. At the end of the day, these are for you and they're for your personal revision. So if there's a particular design or a particular diagram that you can learn from, then it's worth doing it to add into your revision. So make sure what you are drawing or any diagrams you're making are relevant. Be careful if you're using photographs because too many images and things can detract from the main points, but it's a really good way of backing up information or describing things. So you could use drawings, okay? This would represent, words and pictures. You could perhaps put diagrams together. That's really good for breaking down complex concepts. Posters are another good way of dual coding because, again, you've got the combination of words and pictures or diagrams. Timelines, especially good if you want to put something in a chronological order, so history ideal for timelines. And even graphic organizers. So you've got the mixture of visual information, some verbal if you want to as well on there. But examples would be free diagrams, mind maps, and something called a Venn diagram, which I'll be picking up a bit later in a further session. So key principles, if you are going to dual code in your revision, is to cut things down. So you're reducing the amount of content. So be selective and only use the most important information. chunk everything together, so divide the content into groups of related information. You can align it, make sure that your words and your pictures are neatly ordered, so that makes them easier to read. And restrain, so avoid overdoing it. In other words, don't go crazy with different fonts and colours and things. By all means, use different fonts and colours. But the important thing is that you are putting it clearly down in a way that you can learn from it and understand. Another revision technique is something called concrete examples. So sometimes students get a false sense of confidence in their abilities to memorize new material. They might think, yes, I've got that, I know that. But by using concrete, relevant, real life examples, it can really help you to understand some quite difficult concepts and ideas. Now, they're called abstract ideas. And what concrete information does is basically give an example to back up that abstract information. So if you were using concrete examples, you would find specific examples, everyday examples even, to help develop and deepen understanding. So abstract ideas can be really difficult. So as you can see there, I've written concepts, theories, ideas. These are just things that you have to learn, basically. But if you can get an example, a specific example that you understand, then all of a sudden that concept, that abstract idea, becomes more relatable and you understand it better. So an example of this would be foreshadowing can be explained with a very specific concrete example. So in Romeo and Juliet, the tragic ending is subtly foreshadowed in the very first act of the play. So that is an example where you've got a concept that's got a concrete example and you can understand that concept from that. So look through your books and your class notes and see if you can find concrete examples that are relevant to that abstract idea that you are learning about. So it's basically using real world examples to increase your understanding. So this is another concrete example of scarcity, which is an abstract idea. So you've got two outlines here of a plane, and it says on one side, 4 months in advance, you've got many seats available, so there's no scarcity. The tickets are cheap because they're buying them in advance. And then on the right-hand side, you've got closer to the day of departure, you've got most of the seats are taken, so there is scarcity. So you've now got expensive tickets to buy on that plane. So this is a concrete example explaining that word of scarcity, and it's something that you could relate to and look back to and then understand. So when you're studying, try to think about how you can turn ideas you're learning into concrete examples, making a link between the idea you're studying and then a vivid concrete example, and that can really help the lesson to stick better in your brains. So you can find concrete examples anywhere. It could be things that your teachers mention in class as examples to get you to understand. There might be things in your books or your notes or other classroom materials that you can use. And look for examples for yourselves as you go around your everyday and share these examples with friends. And the technique is elaboration. So the term elaboration can be used to mean a lot of different things, but when we're talking about studying using elaboration, it involves explaining and describing ideas with many more detail. So elaboration also involves making connections among ideas that you're trying to learn. So for example, if you are asked a question and you make links to that information and then you're expanding on what you know to add to it. So ask yourself a question, maybe about a topic that you're learning, and then you have to delve deeper into that information. And the more information you have about a specific topic, the stronger your grasp and ability to recall will be. So, for example, if you had a question like when you learn about the causes of World War I, you could be asked what causes are linked together. You could then take it a step further. Which causes are short or long term? Which was the major cause out of all of those causes? So you're actually developing your intellect a lot further by elaborating. So another way to elaborate is to take two ideas of concepts and to think about the various ways that they are similar and how they are different. So this is an example of elaboration. What is happening? What is happening next? What does it go on to do? So this is a tree chart, and it might help you to trigger your memory off. So instead of just writing this whole thing out in one line, you have got the consequences put into a little diagram, which hopefully will help you to understand global warming. So you've got fossil fuels being burned. This is a cause, which leads to CO2 emissions, which is a cause, which leads to the blanket of CO2 around the Earth, which is a cause, which leads to global warming. And seeing it put in that way and elaborated in that way helps you to understand the process. It's a lot clear to be seen, and it is hopefully a lot more understandable as well in that way. The other thing to look out for is exam vocabulary and command words. So there will be subject-specific key terms that you will probably need to learn for every subject. So there's a list of certain command words below, and these could be used in your exams. I know in history there's 2 or 3 there that we would use in certain exams. So do you understand what the question is asking you? Your teachers will probably be able to help you with this, and it's worth you asking them a question. Are the stems of the questions similar in each exam paper? Is there a certain question that you have to do a certain thing for? Do you need to evaluate for one question? In which case you need to know what evaluation means. Do you need to describe something in a different question? In which case you need to understand what that command word means. So that is a list, but obviously you can add to that list because there will be other command words which are used for different subjects as well. And obviously, useful websites on social media, the internet can be a great source of revision support, and I will explain that a little bit more deeper in the next session. For subject-specific examples, useful websites, YouTube videos, ask your teachers for recommendations because they will know that there's a whole host of different online materials out there, revision materials, but some of them are better than others. They will be able to help you in the choice of how you spend your time. If you plan to do any looking at revision websites, they will be able to help you and point you in the right direction. Another technique you could use is to map it out. Now, this is really good if you're short on time and you want to be able to revise and plan an answer, but you don't necessarily want to write it all out. So if you take an essay question and you map out your answer, so you don't write it in a full response, you actually bullet point the main bits that you would put into that answer. And then you can actually check with the mark scheme if you wanted to, decide if your plan meets the criteria regarding marks. And you could do this for a number of questions. So this is really good if you're getting short on time and you want to practice exam questions. I know I certainly use this a lot in history because a lot of our answers are quite long answers. So if we map it out and put the main points of where we would take the essay and what we would put in it, you can see straight away what you would get the marks for, and that is a really, really good technique for cutting down on time. Brain dump is another really good way of checking that you know things, you're understanding. So basically you just choose any topic and you write down as much as you can remember without referring to your notes. Then you check your notes, you see what you've missed out on, and you then go back and you try and fill the gaps again without the notes. And then once you've done that, check your notes a third time and then add in the information that's really sticking, that you can't get. So it's really good for identifying the knowledge you know and the knowledge you don't, obviously. You're writing things down, which is really good because you've got your paper and you're giving yourself maybe a timed limit as well, maybe 10 minutes to do that particular task. It's helping you to organize your information because once you can't remember anymore, you could add the extra things that you found out, maybe in a different color, to help them stand out. So you can use these notes again. It helps you to check your understanding, what you know and what you don't know, what you need to go back over. And then you can obviously keep these notes and revisit it. So the next time you're doing that particular topic, get out the brain dump for that topic, have a little look through, think about whether there's anything else you could add to your notes, and maybe even time yourself and give yourself a smaller time frame and redo that note to see if you can remember everything that's on there. So it's a really, really good technique of getting information out of your brain. And you could use just paper like this where you've got different topic sections and then you just regurgitate and you just say as much as you can on that particular topic area that you can remember. Really good for checking your understanding. Papers, I've mentioned these before, but you can ask your teachers for practice questions or even exam papers. You can also obviously check the website of the exam board that you sit in. They will have all the past papers on there. So you can complete them without notes. You could even do it in exam conditions. And then you could download the mark schemes and check your answers. And again, be able to identify the gaps in your knowledge. So you can target your revision further with what else you need to learn. So just some hints when you're tackling past papers. Try and keep to the time limit. Underline maybe the important points in the question, because that will help you to focus your answer. Make brief answer plans for essay questions if you didn't want to answer them fully. Do as many past papers as you possibly can, because they're really good for checking your understanding. And then make sure that someone checks your answers, or get the answers from the relevant websites and check to see what you are missing. The other thing is to practice. If you know you're going to have a certain essay, for example, so for these essay subjects, you can take a past paper question and perhaps practice writing effective introductions and conclusions, and then look back at your notes, remind yourself of the important things you need to remember, and then go back in and add to those introductions or conclusions again. And you could do this for different topics, for different texts, or different papers that you're studying. We've talked about quizzes before, but again, they are really, really useful to check your understanding. So you could write a set of questions, you could put the answers alongside, you could bend that paper in half and then retest yourself in one of your revision sessions and then check through with the answers, or get somebody else to check through the answers for you. It's important, remember, to either write or say your answers out loud, because as we know, just thinking about them in your brain, sometimes you don't necessarily know the full answer. When it comes to having to say it out loud or writing it down, that is the best check, really, to know that you know the work. So reading through the quizzes in head can give you a false sense of security. So make sure you are writing or saying the answers aloud. So self-quizzing, really good to identify knowledge, good to review and create. Cover up an answer. You can self-mark and reflect, and maybe use a different colour pen for anything that you've missed. So when you retest yourself the next time, you can check that you're picking up the bits that you missed the time before. So it's really, really good. It can be used for all subjects and all topics. But remember, not just the subjects you enjoy or the topics you enjoy. Do everything to make sure that you're covering everything. This again, I've put a little link, so you've got this that you can download and do your own sets of questions and answers. And then obviously, as I said earlier, go back in with a pen and add in anything that you've got wrong. So it's important when you're doing your revision that you're thinking hard, that you're reducing the information and the notes that you've got. So make sure you're doing that. Try and keep your notes as small and concise as you possibly can. Connect things together. So for each subject, consider the exam paper, group together questions that require the same technique. Work on connecting things to make your revision that much easier. And transform your notes. So maybe read a paragraph from your notes or your textbook and transform it into a diagram or a chart or a sketch. Maybe not letting yourself use words. Or look at a diagram in silence, for example, and transform it into a paragraph, an explanation to check your understanding. So when you're doing arguments, so you might have in English a debate that you have to obviously put together. Try drawing up a split list with the for and against points. And this could be written on the side of your answer so that you've got a little plan of where you're going. So what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Okay. And maybe bullet point the main points that you're going to go over when you come to write out your answer. You could do it for other subjects as well. So the one underneath there is for blood vessels, and you're comparing arteries and veins. I mentioned earlier the Venn diagram. Now, this is really good when you've got information that sort of corresponds in parts. So what I mean by this is you've got a good example here where you've got tomato and an apple on either side. So you've got the tomato, red flesh, mushy, savoury. The apple, white flesh, firm, sweet. And then in the middle, you've got what connects them both. They're both fruit. They're both round, they're both smooth skin. So the bit in the middle is what connects these two different sections. So really handy when it comes to revision. So we've got an example here that shows some information about blood vessels. So what we've got in the middle is what links these two together. So you could do this for a number of different subjects. Science, really, really handy to be able to do a Venn diagram for the things that cross over certain elements of your studies there. A diagram is also really, really good when you've got to explain a complicated process, and really good for learning. So this here has got the several stages in the oxygenation of blood. So you have your lungs, your heart, your body, and then you can see quite clearly how it all works. The right side being so different to the left side. So again, a diagram, cutting down a huge chunk of written information into a diagram, can make it so much more simpler. The other thing is mnemonics. These are really, really good when it comes to trying to learn, especially an order of things. So here we've got the planets, and on the left-hand side, we have my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. And obviously the first letter corresponds with the planet's first letter. So a really good way of learning the order of things just by learning one sentence. We've got one here for maths, which covers circumference and an area of circle. So we've got for the circumference, cherry pies are delicious. So we've got C for circumference equals pi, and then the D diameter for delicious. And underneath for area of the circle, apple pies are 2. So we've got the A for the apple equals pi, and then R radius squared for the 2. And the R is the R in the written R. So really, really good ways of learning techniques to use, but in a mnemonic sense. So learning to learn. You've actually been learning all your life, but here's just some do's and don'ts when it comes to revision. So do make sure that you get all you can from each lesson from now on in. Your teachers will be giving you a lot of tips, giving you a lot of suggestions. And, you know, it makes sense at this point if there's things that you don't understand that you ask. Do practice doing questions. This certainly does help you to ensure you understand your work and helps your memory. Do talk to your friends about your work. Try and test your understanding by explaining it to someone, and develop the best way for you to memorize information. As we know, you will be different to some of your friends, and what suits you might not suit them. Don't let yourself get tired. Your brain will become fuzzy after a late night, and then easy tasks will seem harder. So make sure you're having plenty of rest. And don't worry if you haven't solved every problem before you finish your evening work. Your brain is a great problem solver, and it can solve problems when you sleep. So make sure you're getting enough sleep. It isn't all work, work, work. Of course, enjoy life, revise some of the time, but revision does need to be planned, and it does need a little bit of determination as well. But if you spread the workload over a period of time, you are certainly likely to achieve more. You will be under less pressure, and you can enjoy your work a lot more. You're less likely to experience stress if you start revising earlier, and you will have more time to relax and enjoy life too. So make sure you plan your work, okay, properly. Another bonus is, of course, it will reduce stress. So make a list now of what you need to do. Also, find out the dates of your exams. Make a little timetable of how you're going to revise up until that date of the exam. And you could obviously plan, design, and draw up your own personal timetable for revision. So just think about the best way of dividing up your evening time. So in today's session, we have looked at additional revision techniques, which were dual coding, concrete examples, elaboration, command words, mapping it out, brain dumps, importance of past papers, self-quizzing, and mnemonics. In our next session, we're going to be looking at using AI, artificial intelligence, to revise effectively and efficiently, how to avoid stress during revision, and top tips on the exam day. So I hope that you will be able to have a look at the next session, and I hope that you can take away some ideas from this session on how you would like to try some new revision techniques to go with what you need to do in different subjects. Thank you very much.